Hello and welcome to another drones video. I am Brumble, your host, and today we are going to talk about roll tables, but I decided we should talk first about shelter and production, and that is what we will talk about right now. In drones, you can produce your own resources, and you can do this anywhere, but it's better, easier, and faster to find a shelter and begin converting it into a factory of some sort. Your landing pod can be used for this, but it's not very efficient. Land pod factories, while you can start them right away, also take twice as long to produce any resources that any other shelter you begin to fortify and industrialize. All basic production times on cards and inherent resources always take twice as long at a landing pod. This is a hard-coded rule that ignores chassis advancement and tools. So while you could use a landing pod as a factory, if you are desperate, it's highly advised not to do so. Okay, so what are the shelters and what can be done with them? Well, the shelters vary depending on luck. Many are some form of wrecked transport that can have their engines repaired but will never drive again. This allows the drone in question to charge battery packs and power basic machines or tools, but restricts movement. Each basic project at a shelter takes 2 full turns to complete, these being power repairs, defenses, audio and visual scouting, and scrap collection. After every 5 turns spent in a shelter hex and or the surrounding full circle of hexes, 2 enemies will spawn at random. There are various methods to determine their locations, and then they will seek out the player. There's a lot here. In order to generate spare power, fuel will have to be scavenged. Alternatively, the player drone could turn off a function for 5 turns to recharge spare power cells, but the player must remain immobile for the full 5 turns. This is hard-coded. And be within the shelter. Turning off multiple functions does not improve the time for charging, as the limit is for safety regulations and must be adhered to or risk instant chassis overcharge and failure. However, ammo, as long as it is of the power cell variety, can be charged in the same way as the player, but taking only 1 turn to recharge, and the player can still move around while it is doing so. Shelters can also be used to start crafting makeshift weapons and items and machines. These can be power cell, gunpowder, or explosive in origin if they are weapons. But keep in mind, power cells require the least setup and the smallest procedural imprint to work with as a weapon class. Gunpowder, being the weakest of the three, requires much fewer resources to make in mass quantities, but also does far less damage to enemy drones than the other two. Explosive weapons require the most setup, both in steps and resources, but also do far more damage than the other two types of weapons. Supplemental power can also be set up at a shelter, as well as extra defenses, and even the calling in of a support drone for bonus protection. At the basic zero-level chassis, drones can call in 2 other basic defense drones per shelter that they set up, at a maximum of 5 shelters. Keep in mind, though, that while every shelter ignores the 3 spaces nothing rule, that every level of the shelter's equipment, that shelter counts as a higher level structure. So even if only one tool or station is second tier quality, or defended by 1 defensive drone, then that shelter now attracts 3 enemy drones every 5 turns. This scaling keeps the game tough, very tough, but good still, really good. Making sure the player is always struggling to adapt to the situation they are in and overcoming hardship to make it worth the extra effort. It's a very good system. And then there is research, which can also be performed at shelters, but power must be running at as much as can be put out of the shelter at any one turn, along with the supply of at least 3 of the 4 resource types. The player rolls a d6 for 3 turns, adding up the numbers, trying to keep the total as low as possible. Schematics or plans subtract their value from this total, but force the player to produce only one sort of invention or improvement. And then the player chooses from their available options in a roll table and gets a newly crafted item from their research. Actual crafting may take longer than 3 turns as listed on plans or schematics. The lower the number of the roll value, the better the quality of the item produced. Players lose all items and resources when the game is finished, but better shelters and more advanced craft items produce more points and bits at the end of the map. But, and big but, when the player crafts an item of a certain type, their knowledge in that field improves, and after a set amount of craftings, they can choose to upgrade or specialize their knowledge at a space station. This is how skills are obtained, and while it's possible to level up a skill in the field, a player drone must return to the space station hub in order to apply any benefits from leveling a skill. And now, the space station, once returned to, works the same as a shelter in the field, but already contains all of the basic tools and machines that can be created by a drone when starting their first campaign. More improvements can be made, but players must trade points and bits for a fee of maintenance, lest their station quarters degrade in their absence. This fee is required at the start of all games but the player's first game. If the player fails to pay this fee, machines and tools in their home degrade to a previous level once returned to. Not to mention all spare chassis the player has tried and wishes to keep also incur additional maintenance fees. These fees start out small, but it's very easy to progress too far too fast after a successful mission, and players overwhelm themselves in their own debt. Important to remember. If a player defaults on 10 of these payments in a row, they lose all collected chassis, all skills, and all saved licenses, contracts, and/or schematics, and must start over again as if they were playing their first game. This rule is hard-coded into the game. All hard-coded rules are to always be followed, especially in tournament play. Lotrin, what's a tournament?
It's a competition involving a lot of people trying to be the winner above all other contestants. You all set over there, little worm?
Thanks, Lotrin. Okay. That is as much as I wanted to say for today. Next week, I'll be going over roll tables and their drastic importance and effect on gameplay.
Do you want some of my black moon, or do you want me to set aside your own black moon from the pile? Little worm, you there?
There's black moons? I need to go. We're done here. This is the end. How do I think of the black moon? Set me aside one. I'll be right there. Gotta do the extra. Good night, everyone. Leave your comments down below. Like and share to help us grow and feed a hungry Brumble. That's me. And don't forget, we encourage each and every one of you to stay safe out there.